They'd been sailors for over 20 years. It was only natural that they would venture into unknown waters. What was the force that made them devote the major part of their life to this passion? What made them set aside their work? Truly, all we can say is that this force was overwhelming and difficult to explain how it imposed itself on them. Born in Quebec, Diane grew up near a major river, calm lakes, and the majestic Saint Laurent. Such a proximity to nature might have explained the attraction. In addition, she was surrounded by creative people. Add this together, and you will find that it is not surprising that as an adult, Diane would want to take up and express herself artistically. After taking up painting and other media, she chose photography. Diane went to the Ontario College of Arts. She took portrait photography at Humber College and darkroom at Sheridan. Her landscape photography was published in Canadian Living, photography magazines, and exhibited at different art show events across the GTA. Diane had no notion of ocean sailing. The only time she'd been on a ship was with her family using the Canadian steamship line to travel to their vacation locations. Even though Jeffrey was raised in a minor village in the north of England, he wanted to become a marine biologist. He had acquired the taste of the ocean through books. After years of working in totally opposite fields, Diane at Kenwood Electronics in the communication department and Jeffrey, electronic engineer as quality assurance in a medical imaging company, Sedara, they came to the conclusion that buying a small sailing boat might be a good way to escape during the weekends. And the plans became reality. Working toward an objective that they thought was strictly the domain of the rich and famous took years of efforts. The biggest risk of all, they said, was to live the life to the fullest, or not to live life to the fullest. Dream big and go for it. Jeffrey relied on his ability, knowing that it was only his own careful hand that he would make it to his destination. Therefore, courses in sailing, navigation, communications prepared Jeffrey for future cruising. Oops, thank you. In 1999, they embarked on their sailboat, Perce Neige. Destination, south. Joining them, crossing Lake Ontario, visit the Erie Canal and the splendid Hudson River. You will sail the Atlantic, discover the Dismal swamp, navigate rivers, and cross the tempestuous Gulf Stream and the Atlantic. You will learn about the Bahamas history, visit the iguanas, face the nurse sharks, and relax near stunning blue water. To communicate with their family and sailors' friends, Diane and Jeffrey sent weekly reports to their daughter, Andree, who had set up a web page. Based on these records and captivating images, we invite you to join the adventures with Diane and Jeffrey, who no longer, unfortunately, is with us. Well, he is, but he isn't. Please give Diane and her friend Carrie, who will help with the presentation, a warm show-back welcome. Thank you.
Which one to do? Notes.
So, because our story happened so many years ago, 18 years ago, people asked me, why, after so many years, are you telling the story? Well, approximately 5 months ago, I went to a celebration of life for all places. And I was impressed with the minister's lecture. He kept reminding us to tell your story. So fast forward a few months, I read an article about Robert Redford. He said that the most wonderful phrase he heard when he was a child was, "Once upon a time." And how storytelling became hugely important to him because he felt that that's how you really create continuity over time. So, once upon a time, our dream came alive. So, The decision to go was the easiest. Patience and hard work. Jeffrey's motto was non palma sine pulvere, so no reward without effort. After years of preparation, we were ready. We dismissed what people said. It's dangerous. Hurricane, there are pirates, you will be kidnapped. We were not trying that we were great sailors or racers. We were, in fact, just tourists on a boat. About our home for the trip. Perce Neige was our third boat. The first boat, named Calafare, was 25 foot. With this boat, we learned that we prefer to cruise in some comfort. Then came Nouvelle Affaire. Nouvelle Affaire, the lightning boat. It was not that Nouvelle Affaire sailed as fast as lightning, but rather that it was hit by lightning while in dock at Mimico Cruising Club. The strike hit Nouvelle Affaire, a powerboat, and another sailboat 2 slips away. All 3 boats were damaged. Our instruments were destroyed. A 12-inch section of the hull was burned right through. The good news was that all people on board Nouvelle Affaire were unharmed. After a lot of reading, we decided that a metal hull was a definite requirement, and Perce Neige entered our lives. Perce Neige is the sister ship of the G.E. Bernier II. In 1977, the G.E. Bernier II was the smallest ship in history and the first sailboat to have successfully, in one season, circumnavigated North America through the Northwest Passage, renowned for its difficult ice navigating condition. The G.E. Bernier II is now in the Quebec Marine Museum. Having such a reputable design, there was no hesitation when we saw that Perce Neige was for sale. The name Perce Neige is French for snowdrops. The snowdrop is the first flower to pierce the snow in early spring. Likewise, our Perce Neige should burst out of the Canadian snow and go south to bloom. So Lake Ontario and the Erie Canal. Of course, this is the complete trip from, most of you obviously know all this route going back and forth. So we really needed to untie the lines, not only with the boat, with family and friends. Month of preparation had exhausted us mentally as well as physically. Improvement to rigs, taking navigation classes, diesel courses, learning Morse code, and installing shortwave radio, VE3, VFQ. And I said to Jeffrey, I'll never remember that, all those letters. He said, VFQ, very foxy Quebecois. Familiarize ourselves with the new GPS and computer system. Read about countries' regulation, environmental laws, custom and immigration, and setting up the web page that our daughter Andree had started. As we motored out of the bay, we glanced toward the CN Tower. The Canadian Air Force snowbird were sweeping past Toronto. Here they are over there, in a tight diamond formation. Was it our send-off? Leaving our dock was the important event rather than arriving in a particular destination. Untying the lines. We traveled to Cobourg, Ontario. After a visit to the yacht club, we found our boat covered in thousands of aphids. For safety, we had left one hatch and one light open. Recovering from our initial shock, we fought them off as well as we could. But we were lucky that our dinner was in a sealed pressure cooker. With a regiment of dead insects all over the boat, we navigated across Lake Ontario to Rochester, New York, because worse weather was forecasted for the next following days. 8 to 10 foot wave kept us in Rochester Club for 2 days. Good opportunity to clean up after the carnage in Covert. While I resumed the job of removing the little dead critters from the previous day, Jeffrey worked in the engine room and found time to relax. As soon as the weather turned, we motored to Oswego and began locking through the Erie Canal. And I'm sure you all know about the Oswego going through Lake Oneida and so forth to the river. Jeffrey at the wheel and myself on deck, we motored into the first lock. It was a very imposing, daunting experience. With the boat hooked, I would grab the stern line from Jeffrey and hurried forward to pick up the very slimy and dirty line and waited for the water to rise. We learned and improved our docking routine. After 3 or 4 locks, it took only 5 minutes to recuperate from the stress of entering and docking into the lock. Most of the time, we found ourselves floating gently through very picturesque scenery.
Between 1817 and 1825, the Erie Canal was built to create a navigable route from New York City and the Atlantic Ocean to the Great Lakes via the Hudson River. Immigrants from Europe came to America to build the canal. For 8 years they excavated, mostly by hand and animal power. In the beginning of the Erie Canal, boats and barges were pulled by mules and oxen. As it opened the American interior, the people could travel in comfort from Albany to Buffalo in 5 days, instead of 2 weeks in crowded stagecoaches. As the population grew and the canal prospered, it became not only a transportation waterway, but also a vacation area. A song was written referring to travelers who would ride on top of the boats. The low bridges would require them to get down out of the way to allow safe passage under a bridge. And that's why sailboats have to lower the mast when using the canal.
The canal is nearly 200 years old and still going strong. After clearing the final lock, we arrive at Castleton on the Hudson, where, along with other boaters, We help each other with masting, and we remain there for a few days. Barges, tugboats creating wakes, plus the current, make anchoring complicated. But the landscape was beautiful. Sometimes we would point out a flock of Canadian geese. The looming blue Adirondacks. Or a sunlit field of wheat. We stopped in picturesque villages where it was possible to anchor and where people were most charming and welcoming. We had many moments of total contentment, end of days when the sun dove into the sea, splashing half the sky with warm lights. We had simple pleasure of watching our boat slice through the surface of the sea, push, but also guided by an invisible force, the magic of the wind. The College of West Point was our last anchorage on the Hudson, and as the Snowbird had done in Toronto for our departure, the college put on a display of skydivers as a welcoming gesture. An eternal romantic, I convinced myself that was for us. New York, New York. We were looking forward to spend time in Manhattan. The safest location was to leave the boat at the 79th Street Marina on a mooring ball. At Broadway and 79th Street, we took the subway. 5 minutes later, we were in Times Square. The place was overwhelming. People, noise, light, yellow cabs. And then the next day, dancing in the rain. That's what we did for our encore in Manhattan. Although it was sunny when we left the boat, the dark cloud appeared quickly over New York. I had left our rain gears in the boat. I had never been so wet in 20 years, and I had never seen so many umbrellas. We stopped under a restaurant awning, and to my amazement, the name of the awning was Max and Alex, the name of our two grandsons. Sailing past the Statue of Liberty was emotional, as it proved to be the end of our first leg of the trip. Stressful for Jeffrey because he had to steer and wander our way through the tugboat, passenger liner, the aircraft carrier Intrepid, and many barges. Exciting for me because sitting on the bowsprit, I could shoot so many interesting sights. We made it to Staten Island to wait for the perfect weather window and start our ocean voyaging. We sailed the Atlantic Ocean, stayed in Manasquan Inlet, and further to Atlantic City, making the Trump family richer. In good sea condition, we sailed to Cape May, New Jersey. The cloud moved in. Our entrance into Cape May was difficult. There was a severe tidal rip in the entrance channel. Steering to keep us on course was difficult. The boat twisted around, and it required all my strength and skills to bring us back to on course, safely through the channel. That entry turned out to be very stressful, and as we were preparing to visit into Cape May, we heard a band playing the John Philip Sousa March. We had anchored in front of the U.S. Coast Guard. Were the forces celebrating another stage of our trip? It is 60 miles from Cape May through the Delaware Bay to the Chesapeake Canal. We arrive in Annapolis, Maryland. Thousands of boats from all over the world. In the presence of international sailors, we quickly realize how little we have seen and how much more we want to see.
Annapolis reminds us of Quebec City with its old cobblestone streets and historic buildings. Annapolis, Maryland is the state capital and located on the Chesapeake Bay. It features great architecture, monuments, and the Naval History Museum. Today it is known as America's sailing capital.
It is 30 miles east of Washington. It was easy to travel by train to the national capital. In Annapolis, dinghy docks are provided by the city or private organization. Even on our dinghy, you constantly need to be aware of the current and tide. One day, our dinghy was jammed under the dock, actually they were all jammed under there. And we all look at each other and wonder, what are we going to do now? And Jeffrey said, well, why don't we just deflate it and spend another hour at Davis Pub eating those little blue crabs served on newspaper table covering. They're lots of work, but not worth the trouble. After 2 weeks in Annapolis, we were ready for tranquil, secluded anchorage. We stayed in various inlets where we enjoyed the fall color, wildlife, and sunsets. Because of insurance regulation, we could not travel further south until November 1st. On that day, we motored to the Dismal Swamp Canal. We took this route as we were more interested in enjoying the serene countryside than in making a fast passage. This historic canal can be dangerous, as the trees, which gives it its charm, often loses branches and may block the canal. We were able to raft up at the Visitors Center, North Carolina, for a few days.
In 1763, George Washington made his first visit to the Great Dismal Swamp and suggested a north-south canal to connect a section of Virginia and North Carolina. The canal was dug completely by slaves hired from nearby landowners. It took approximately 12 years of back-breaking construction to complete the 22-mile-long waterway. The first real ship made passage through the Dismal Swamp Canal in June 1814. Several establishments developed. In 1829, the Lake Drummond Hotel opened. It was a popular place for duels, eloping couples, and fugitives escaping justice. During World War II, German U-boats attacked and crushed ships in North Carolina's coastal waters. The Torpedo Alley, or Torpedo Junction off North Carolina, is one of the graveyards of the Atlantic Ocean. It was so named because of the high number of attacks on Allied shipping by German U-boats in World War II. After the war, in 1945, traffic through the Dismal Swamp Canal decreased, and the canal's traffic shifted from commercial shipping to private boating. About 2,000 boaters transit the canal each year. There is history, there is nature, there is floral, all the while along a peaceful stretch of water.
After the canal, we continued the inside route because we like to visit interesting waterfront community, both large and small. And unlike on the ocean, you can sleep all night, every night. Checking the weather forecast is necessary. When the weather turns bad, we would leave the hook down, read a good book, and solve all the world's problems. Oriental, Beaufort, Wrightsville Beach, and Carolina Beach, all in North Carolina. Docking is free, and they provide a bus to go to the Walmart and a pedicure. Beyond the beauty of towns, small and large, are some vistas that cannot be seen in any manners but from a boat. We anchored off a sandy bluff on a misty late afternoon. There was a steep sand dune beside the anchorage, and aptly named Sandy Island. We climbed up to the top of the dune. I did not want to walk far, as I had seen strange bark in the sand. However, we concluded that the alligators and the snake wouldn't run away if they saw my flaming red toe. Which I had get from the earlier pedicure. Sandy Island is part of Mount Rena, the highest point in South Carolina. Since we had climbed the dune in only 1 minute or two, we realized why South Carolina used the term low country so often. Because the intracoastal is almost entirely a narrow waterway, close attention to navigation is necessary. The autopilot that relieves boredom offshore is unusable. Constant steering is required. Here's my stern look. Further, the twists and turns are dangerous at night, so stopping early is necessary. On a cold and windy evening, we were anchored in a creek and prepared for a quiet evening. Suddenly, we heard the sound of a horn, and at first assumed it was from the ICW. After the third blast, we saw a tugboat pushing a big barge toward us. On the radio, the tug captain said that we were anchored in the middle of the creek. Jeffrey responded that, according to the guys in charts, he was in water restricted to private boats. After discussion, the tugboat said that he could make it around us. In case another barge decided to take a shortcut, we re-anchored closer to the shore. We warmed up the stew and went to sleep. We later learned that further south in Ferdinand Beach, tragedy hit. A barge ran into a boat and killed all occupants. We navigated in and out of the ICW and experienced the most fantastic sunset. Soon we were in Beaufort, South Carolina, the home of antebellum architecture. Then Florida, where I had the great joys photographing the pelican and the dolphins who ran around chasing each other and came very close to our dinghy in the process. It was the most amazing and most intimate encounter. St. Augustine.
The Spanish founded this historic city in 1565. It is the oldest permanent European settlement in the continental United States. Spanish architectural styles predominate in most of the government and other major buildings, including the fortress of Castillo de San Marcos. In the evening, we walked the very narrow streets of the old Spanish Quarter and participated in a parade of lights, a custom going back to the early 1800s. Soldiers dressed in period costumes walked to each corner of the city with torches to light the streets.
Vero Beach. We spent Christmas in Vero Beach. No snow, but it was fun on the water amongst all the dressed up boat and Christmas lights suspended from the mast. We enjoyed potluck and the music of talented voyageurs. While there, we were introduced to two couples with whom we would travel across to the Bahamas. Before venturing into the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf Stream, the strong currents and tide, we needed to secure and check our inventory. You do not want to be caught in the Gulf Stream during a blowout. The plan was to cross when the breeze is light and nothing out of the north for several days prior to the journey to allow the stream to calm down. After 2 weeks in Miami Yacht Club, waiting for a safe window, we were glad to leave for the next part of the adventure. I will never forget when I heard over the VHF, "All system go, tomorrow at 5:30 a.m. After fighting the current in the Gulf Stream, it was a relief when we started our run across to Gun Cay, where we anchored for the night. Early next morning, we proceeded across the Bahama banks in 10 to 15 feet of water. The water was various shades of turquoise green depending upon the depth. A slight breeze rippled the surface so that the creatures below appeared shadowy and mysterious. In the evening, we got out of the busy lane and we stopped on the banks to sleep. It was a little unsettling to be out there with no land in sight in all directions. The night was relatively calm. Jeffrey slept on deck. At dusk, only the shape of other boat in the distance defined the sea and the sky. Eerie feeling. At 5 a.m., we left towards the northwest Providence Channel. At this point, the depth sounder appeared to have stopped operating. It went from 10 feet to over 1,000 feet in a mile or so until Club Cay. We hoisted our yellow Q flag. Another perfect landing. It took 3 hours for the female custom officer to issue our cruising permit for 1 year and the Bahamian courtesy flag to be flown at all times. Waiting out the bad weather, which included heavy rain, we finally could fly the kite that Kenwood had given me when I retired. After 4 days, we headed for Nassau. It was a lumpy trip with motor and foresail. While sailing using the VHF radio, Jeffrey entertained us with his British quick wit and repartee, punctuated by Steve American humor, all while the tongue of the ocean was giving us quite a licking. The tongue
of the ocean is the name of a deep oceanic trench in the Bahamas, separating the islands of Andros and New Providence. Its depth varies from 3,600 feet, 1,100 meters, to 6,600 feet, approximately 2,000 meters. This channel and the Providence Channel form the Great Bahamas Canyon.
We arrived in Nassau Harbor, where we were immediately boarded by the Royal Bahamian Defense Force, who came aboard to check our documents, cruising permit, registration, passport, all very professionally done by armed young men. During our stay in Nassau, we learned about the history of the Bahamian island and Nassau. From piracy and slavery to the modern-day Nassau. For $1, we toured by bus the island of New Providence. By dinghy, we went to the Atlantis Marina, that hosts very large, luxurious yacht, complete with helicopter. Possibly the most typical dish of this island is the conch salad. A freshly made bowl of Bahamian conch salad is a perfect way to taste our way into Bahamian culture. The dish is made of onion, green pepper, tomato, and conch meat. Not only is the queen conch used for food, but its spiral shells is also carved into various tools, musical horn, and ceremonial objects. Nassau is home to big resort and trendy restaurant. We had come for the more laid-back exumas, sparsely habited caves with sapphire blue water everywhere. The exuma are an exotic collection of dream destination. There, nature outnumbers man. Coastline remain flawless. The exumas are rich in history as they were settled by British loyalists and their slaves following the American Revolution. Each island offers its own unique Bahamian experience.
The Isle of Allen's Keys was fascinating as it was populated with iguanas. Bahamian rock iguanas are actually endangered and were thought to be completely extinct. Wildlife protection laws help to preserve the species. They're friendly and non-aggressive. After Allen's Cay, we motored the 12 miles into the south anchorage of Norman's Cay. It had a checkered past and appeared to us to be quite innocuous, except for the sunken twin engine DC-3 just north of the main anchorage. The rusting remnants of a jet so loaded down with cocaine that it wasn't able to make it off the runway. And the abandoned house, riddled with bullets, still in the walls, served as the headquarters for Carlos Leder's cocaine smuggling operation from 1978 to around 1982. He founded the Medellin cartel. The best part of the abandoned house was that they always had a small dock and a cistern. That's where we could refill our 2 5-gallon water jugs. It's on this island that the DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, captured Carlos.
But us, we were only interested in walking north from the dock, where we found a very colorful little beach bar and restaurant named Macduff, where we enjoyed the proverbial cheeseburger in paradise with the local Calic beer. Back in our boat, and just before dark, a large black boat motored through the anchorage and occupied the dock. Our imagination soared. Drug, the CIA, the DEA. We settled for the optimistic probability that it was the supply ship from Macduff, bringing cases of thirst-quenching Calic beer. We explored using the dinghy. In the other anchorage, 2 of the sailors were wandering around in a shallow, sandy area. One with an article of clothing covering her head, which we realized as we got closer was her bikini top. In tropical countries, it is well known that brain cells need more protection than mere mammary glands.
Continuing south, we stopped in Sampson's Key, Staniel Key, and Big Major's. Big Major is the island where wild pigs roam the beach. And then follow us looking for food as we land the dinghy. The swimming pigs are shrouded in mystery. Legends abound. Tales of shipwreck to one about hungry pirates who dropped them off and never came back. Wade Nixon claims to have brought the first pigs in hopes of starting a pig farm in the late 1990s. He was preparing a sustainable food supply in case of the feared Y2K computer meltdown. If this story is true, the pigs may have even more relieved than we were when the screens did not go dark on New Year's Day 2000.
At the Staniel Quay, we wandered around the narrow, poorly maintained road and found the blue supermarket, open but unattended, and the pink supermarket, which had someone willing to take our money if we were willing to pay the ridiculous price of $7 for a very small box of Raisin Bran. Still in Staniel Quay, we went to a library fundraiser. The library itself was kept in a small yellow building. There was no librarian, just the honor system.
Later on, joining a snorkeling expedition with friends who had found a steep rocky face going down around 30 feet to a sandy bottom and all kinds of coral in between. The fish varied from very small to 3-foot barracuda, and even an 8-foot nurse shark sitting quietly on the sandy bottom. Jeffrey followed the small shark until he was exhausted. The nurse shark's name may come from the strange sucking noise they make when searching for prey in the sand. They can get quite large, with lengths of up to 5 meters, 15 feet, as adults. Nurse sharks can remain motionless while resting on the seafloor by facing against the flow of water. As with all sharks, this giant fish is incredibly interesting and very important to the delicate marine ecosystem, especially near fragile coral reefs.
At low tide, we all went to Thunderball Cave. The cave was used as a set in the James Bond movie, Thunderball. At high tide, what happened? Yeah, okay. Okay, so we went to Thunderball. Is it going? No. Okay. The cave was used as a set for James Bond movie, yes. At high tide, we would have to swim through the submerged entrance. We chose low tide, low slack tide to avoid that problem and the strong current. The cave opened up into a large room with cathedral ceiling and a few skylights. It was spectacular. Black Point on Great Guiana Island was our next stop. The attractive things about this settlement was the people, friendly, outgoing, and focused on being of service to cruisers. Here, you could hand over our laundry to a lady who washes for $5 per load. Fill our water tank and get a haircut for $2. We met a native gentleman named Willie Road who brought us to the Garden of Eden. He was an affectionate, welcoming air about him and knowledge about the local area. He had collected various branches and rocks, arranged them into structure, which, with a little imagination and his help, you could see ballerina, crocodile, or birds. As we approached the end of the garden, there were trees growing out of the center of the rocks, with scant amount of dirt. Before us was a true garden where fruits were growing. The moral of the story, if there is one, don't pass judgment on first impression only. You risk missing a very special human being. Returning to our boat, Jeffrey experienced a pain in his left side, which became progressively worse. After 15 minutes, I called for help. We had to bring Jeffrey to the nurse on the island. A radio call to the medical officer from Nassau diagnosed kidney stone. Jeffrey was given an injection for pain. It was a stressful episode, and I was glad to be surrounded by good friends. The next day, Jeffrey was his usual happy self, and we were wandering around the miles of beaches. We saw the wave crashing in from the Exuma Sound into the rocky bays and found a blowhole where the sea came up in spout to give us a spectacular show. We had dinner at Lorraine's Cafe, and Val from Barefoot provided the entertainment. It was a memorable evening, lacking only wine, fresh fruit, and vegetable, as the mail boat had not yet arrived, and therefore the supermarket closed. We invited Steve and Val for drinks. Like Val was not a wine aficionado, but she enjoyed our red wine and wanted to know what we were serving. And very seriously, Jeffrey said, Chateauneuf de Box. Georgetown. Georgetown in the Exumas is for sailors. So there's Georgetown on this side. And of course, across a couple of miles, the beaches where most boats are anchored. There's about 300 or 400 boats all over the place here. Visitor feel part of this little town and comes back year after year. They repay the locals by giving their time and money to build baseball field, washroom, etc. The Exuma Market provide a floating dock leading to the store where you buy propane, water, gas, and diesel fuel at a very high price, and those are the pirates. So as you can see, you don't want to come the last one because you have to jump on top of each boat before you come to the dock here. For some, it is their retirement home, but with sand and salt in your pants every day. There is almost no way to stay dry when you have to navigate a dinghy through a 3-foot swell across a mile or two from the anchoring area to the town. The beaches are beautiful, some quiet and secluded. Others are crowded. We stayed at Volleyball Beach for 2 weeks and moved to Sand Dollar Beach, where we prefer a quiet anchorage. From there, we could walk through the rough trail leading to the breathtaking oceanside beaches. For 1 month, we braved the northern, but mostly we enjoyed the company of friends, the local color, great snorkeling, and just relaxing. This was as far south as we planned to go that year, as it is just north of the Tropic of Cancer and was the limit of our insurance coverage. After 1 month, we left Georgetown towards Cat Island in the outer Bahamas. We sailed daily from village to village. On Little San Salvador, we visited the Hermitage. We climbed the challenging steeps and rough track to the highest hill in the Bahamas. A small stone medieval-like monastery sits on top on Mount Alvernia. It was built in 1939 by a Roman Catholic priest known to local as Father Jerome. In the village of James Cistern, we found that the only local restaurant had run out of food. No mailboat until the next day. We met Dudley, who told us that his wife could supply fried conch, but only for 2 people. She sent Steve and Val to a neighbor who had fried chicken. As we were standing in the front yard, Dudley's son found milk crates for seats and table. As we were standing, Dudley's son found the crates to sit and they were highly hospitable and friendly. At one point, I asked Sydney, "Where is Sydney?" Apparently, Sydney did not come to the island at that time of the year. We would have to reschedule our visit to the actor and diplomat Sidney Poitier's childhood home. Next is another story about eating and boating. And as I'm going to start with the boating part, because every boater knows that a good day on the water only becomes a great day when it is finished off with a delicious meal. We sailed by the glass window bridge. This is it here. And we scheduled our trip to catch the high tide and minimum current going through the current cut. Current cut is a turbulent channel and can be treacherous. I admit it. Hearing from locals about scary current cut had made me extra nervous. We both knew current cut was the only decent way to get out of the extensive shallows in the northern bight of Eleuthera without going back almost 100 miles. It was time to reach down and grab some guts. We studied the charts, tides, and depth before deciding to go ahead, trusting to the accuracy of modern GPS technology to guide us. The only thing that lightened our mood a little bit was our conversation about how we would reward ourselves when the darn thing was behind us. And despite all that, we went aground. While in this position, a hostile-looking boat came towards us. They were wearing balaclavas and holding guns. I started to feel a tight knot of fear in the pit of my stomach. Every feet they approached was a nightmare. Was it my fault that I went aground? Were they friends or were they the enemy? They definitely looked as if they were on a mission because they did not reduce speed as they passed and they ignored us totally. I sheepishly waved at them, not sure if I was going the right thing. But it was as if we did not exist. They just sped away. Meanwhile, we were still aground, and just as actually my pockets were running out of guts, a powerful motorboat came to our rescue. We took a deep breath and we picked our way through the turbulent water ahead. And what a total huge adrenaline rush when we found ourselves on the other side of current cut. It was during this natural high that I had a heavenly vision. Steak, lobster, or tuna. Already our mind had made that transition that all experienced boaters know so well. When we go from white-knuckle fear to thinking about, what's for dinner? I started cooking a fresh blue tuna fish that was given to us by an American fishing boat. That was pure happiness that comes at the end of another great hair-raising day on the water. We sailed to the prosperous and still very British island of Spanish Well, who supply lobster to the Red Lobster restaurant. We dinghied to the abandoned estate in Royal Island, anchored in Little Harbor, stayed in Marsh Harbor and beautiful Hope Town, and further north to Green Turtle Cay with our intention to sail overnight to Florida. The crossing was smooth. During Jeffrey's watch, I struggled to sleep. He, on the contrary, had no difficulty while I was on deck helping Paulette, the autopilot company. Our arrival at custom in Fort Peace was quick. I was ready to rest when Jeffrey suffered another kidney stone attack, diagnosed at the nearest hospital. At that point, I questioned whether we might need to change our plan of leaving the boat in Florida. Unknown to me at that time of what was ahead, some of the changes in Jeffrey's character were manifesting themselves. Alzheimer had already sowed its seeds and was slowly destroying his clever and brilliant mind. We finally agreed that it was prudent to sail back home. We took the same route that we had navigated coming south, but faster. After a third episode of kidney stone on the Hudson River, I have to get to the Hudson River. Here's the Hudson. Our entry into Lake Ontario was wonderful. Familiarity, held care. We went to the Thousand Islands to spend the last few weeks of summer. Friends and family came to welcome us in the Canadian water. Perce Neige had been our home for 1.5 years. That's before and after. A home at which we can change the scenery at will.